Thank you very much for joining us today. We're going to talk a little bit about how we keep the RingLogix platform secure and resilient. It's a question that comes up periodically. Usually bits and pieces are asked, not so much in the totality to walk through it in the sense that what we're going to do today. Jamie, can you scroll to the next slide?
Yeah.
So with us today, I'll do introductions. We have Jamie, of course, and she's the one who normally runs Tech Tuesday, but I thought I'd join, and because I got a nice title, I thought I would do the agenda in the first slide and let Jamie do the rest. And then Gabe Olano, who is the director of our engineering. I think a lot of you people have talked with Gabe over time. And joining us too is Vadim Sokolovich. And Vadim, I apologize if I did not get that to the degree that I should, but appreciate that you're able to join us here today to lend some additional insights into the things that engineering does behind the scenes. Now, taking a look at our agenda, we're going to go through a little bit about the inbound call flow. So I think this is really helpful starting perspective. If we had more time, we could talk about inbound and outbound, but I think inbound is good that it gives you a good picture for how a call, when it comes in, traverses from the edge all the way through to our network or to our net sapiens. Through this process, we're going to talk a little bit about redundancy and infrastructure. So you'll get some pictures of like really what's happening behind the scenes within our data centers and across our network. We'll talk about fraud mitigation and defense, and then we'll talk a little bit more about monitoring and protection that we employ here to keep things operational. And then we'll break for Q&A. And then Jamie will conclude, and she might even pitch her webinar that she's having tomorrow, which is technical, but has a slightly different theme, and she'll explain that more at the end of our presentation today. So with that, let's go through our first slide here. So this is actually a topic I've been wanting to present on for a while, and we kind of kept shuffling it to the background. But there's I think good reasons on why this is an important topic. I think the first reason is customers sometimes are going to demand to know. Tell me a little bit about what you do. And what we're hoping is at the end of this presentation that you have the ammunition to be able to answer that question. And then the other thing to consider here is across this market space, you've seen multiple high-profile outages, with RingCentral probably leading the pack as the worst. And that was globally a problem for them, but definitely a pretty big problem in North America. And if you were to go to say like Reddit, and you see all of the threads of customers who were sharing their war stories and about how long it took for them to get back. You'd see this like 6-hour gap for a lot of them, and in some cases even longer than that. And of course, when customers see that, they, that impacts their decision, their buying decision. So Zoom has had the same thing, and you might have came in early and heard Gabe and I talking about Microsoft is call it just known for this sort of things. If you're a Teams user and you're maybe even worse, you're a Teams phone user, They are typically having multiple outages a year, and they just had one last week. Not everybody was affected in this particular circumstance, but I think it was around 20,000 Microsoft tenants that were affected, which obviously put some challenges around people who use Teams as either their communications solution internally, but Teams is also a phone system. And so I look at these things and you hear all of the chatter out in the market when they happen. And this creates both an opportunity for us as well as an objection for us. And what that means is you got some dissatisfied customers out there, right? We've got some people who, on the eve of Ring Central's problems, if you were to prospect into these customers for a couple of weeks, probably have a lot of people willing to talk to you versus what I'll call the normal day to day. But it is also an exception that often may need to be overcome in the selling cycle. So what our hope is here today is that when we walk through this, even if you don't know everything, at least you know where to come get some answers. This will give you a good starting point to help you be able to frame the discussion with your customer. And the thing that we're seeing these days is we're getting bigger customers. Bigger customers have IT shops. Bigger customers are sophisticated buyers. Bigger customers are going to ask you a question that the pizza shop is not going to ask. So it's good to be prepared for those kind of circumstances as well. So what are we going to talk about? There's a lot of things we can talk about here. So I want to kind of narrow the focus when we're talking about certain words. Resiliency and redundancy. I think when I first started in this industry, you think about like VMware and vMotion, and people got super excited because I could have a single server that is now replicating itself as it needs to, and then keeping data in sync across those two servers so that you have maybe an active passive failover strategy, which is in early days that's what my company was employing. And so when we talk about this, we're going to talk about how we internally here will keep things functioning under partial failures. Partial failures, I would, with confidence, I will say full failures are really not a thing. And you'll understand that concept when Gabe gets to his part. It would take an act of God, I think, across the entire United States of America to put us in the situation where a full failure was to occur. So what we're talking about is how do we keep things functioning when some component has an issue. So the words availability and uptime are often used to describe the pieces of our infrastructure that we try to manage to avoid any customer impacting problems. So applications, services, hardware, third parties are all things we take into scope when we're planning out our strategy here for resilience. Security in this context, we'll talk a little bit about, I'm going to call it a little more normal general market security issues. So things like DDoS and stuff like that, which are, fairly typical kinds of things. But we're also going to talk a little bit about things that are maybe a bit more unique to our industry, and that's preventing abuse. So things like toll fraud, international, domestic, stuff like that are what we're also protecting against. And then, just to set the right expectations here, we're not going to get too deep into the weeds. We're covering a lot of ground. We're covering at I think, a good level so that you can grasp the concepts without necessarily us having to get into the actual internal plumbing. And to be honest with you, some of that stuff, for security reasons, we don't really divulge, because divulging that helps nefarious individuals figure out what they can exploit. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jamie.
Hello, hello. So my part in this, I just want to lay the framework for you. So understanding how inbound calls, and we could do inbound and outbound, but inbound's just a good demonstration. But we want to show you how inbound call flow works and how that's authorized, because that'll lay the groundwork for Gabe to go over what we do to protect in those sections. Hopefully, most of you have seen this before. We have done a couple, we did a webinar on how inbound call flow works, and we have some resources for you that I'll link you to. But basically what happens, if we start at the top of this graphic, the originating call will come in. So the carrier is going to send an invite to the edge of our network, which is our SBC. So, and if you don't know, like me, who had to Google it a long time ago, SBC is the session border controller. So it sends it to the edge of our SBC. What then happens is our billing engine authenticates, and we're, unique in this, that RingOS has a built-in billing engine. So that's where your authentication comes through. So this is stuff that you'd think of like, does my customer have enough credit? If it's like a toll-free, or an international, does my customer have credit limit? Do you have balance on your prepaid account? Things like that. Then once it's authenticated and passes through the billing engine, the SBC will go to the customer PBX. So this is where we're looking at like auto attendance, time frames, call queues. That's where that's built in. So it's going to go from SBC to PBX. Then it's going to go to the customer equipment. Then the call connects. So, if you were like back in the day, you just think I pick up the phone and boom, it connects. You don't really realize that there's this many layers in between you picking up the phone and making a call and then that call connecting to that user at the other end. So hopefully, Gabe, that'll lay a little groundwork for you going into your section. Now, once Gabriella sends this presentation out to you, I've linked you to the inbound calling knowledge base article. And then if you're a partner of ours currently, you'll have access to RingLogix University, of course, and there is a course in there on inbound calling as well. So now I'm going to hand it over to Gabe.
Hey, everybody. Some of you I've spoken to before, some of you I've heard of, some of you I'm sure have spoken to me or heard of me or been referenced in conversations. I mentioned my name is Gabe Olano, the Director of Engineering here. I've always been the Director of Engineering here. Make it a little creepy. It's October, a little shining reference. But I want to go over today some things I think are taken for granted or not necessarily understood in how we keep our systems running and survivable through multiple scenarios, whether it's an outage, a hardware failure, a TID carrier, an ISP failure. There's so many multiple points of failure and how to best overcome and quickly resolve these. Jamie, you want to hit the next slide?
Yeah, for sure.
So this is a high-level overview of our network as it plans to exist. Everything is here except for the West Coast. We have most of it there. We're in the process. The PBX is out there. We're working on getting the rest of the Porta One systems out there. We're in the process of doing an upgrade before we can complete that. But the idea is you can see here uniformity. They're the same across the board. That way, if we lose one, the next one takes over, the hydrant, you cut off the head, the next one pops up, so on and so on. We are stuck with certain limitations on this that are sometimes beyond our control. A bad ISP route, third-party service provider. So one, as Jamie was saying, we keep this in geo-redundant regions, east, west, central. Everybody's covered, and that's not only for sustainability but also for latency, and also that's where the bigger data centers are. I mean, you can have them in a lot of places, but those are the three main regions you want to carry. With our setup here, again, everything's matched. So if we have to turn off Miami, as you've seen in maintenances, whether it be for whatever reason, the port will stay on. the phones cut over. We run currently even our RingOS applications that are custom are on both coasts. We can turn one off while we do maintenance on one to allow for the other, which is great. This is also the same with our carriers. They all know to either be dedicated to a region, if not fail over, such as a service region if you're using that product, or if something fails, they try the next one. And in each case, these are also automated. High level, they move over. This one here, on-demand media scaling requires whitelisting of full IP ranges. I get endless comments about this going, can you narrow it down to an IP? Even so far as can you narrow it down to a port range on that? The reality is we can give you the IPs that are currently in use, but as we spin up new systems, or we go to fail over, the best practice is to have the whole range. That diagram that was shown before with high level, it only looks like a few servers, but the reality is our infrastructure is fairly massive. And there are a lot of IPs out there, and at any given moment, we have to switch either from different subnets or even within the same subnet at a data center. I have been on the other side of this. I have been a system admin, MSP, sales engineer, security admin, and I get where that becomes, well, if something happens, that's my responsibility. That's the customer's going to come after me. So I get the arguments on that. And anybody that would ever want to talk or fully discuss this, I'd like to be more than happy to have an off session about this. But it really goes to the way that we grow. But I've been there. I know what it's like to have a $3 margin on a customer and have something go down, or, hey, I can't afford to have a security incident or something there. There's not enough margin to even deal with it. We do constant testing every quarter. We do failover examinations where we sit there and put our systems through the test. We'll take a data center at a time, play with it, try to break it, see what we can do to go down, see what the times are to come back up, and then figure out where we can improve that. This type of constant testing, learning, changing, gives us the ability to be up as much as possible. The goal is 100%, but the realistic industry standard is 5 nines. But the way these systems are designed, and this comes down to, not to get super technical, but even the hardware that's on the servers. There's redundant NICs on the servers, not even just a 4-port NIC, but 2 separate NIC cards going to PCI interfaces that can allow a PCI failure, card failure, cable failure. Like, that's the level of what we're thinking on these systems. Like, okay, what could ruin somebody's day? Is it a bad cable? We don't make our own cables. We get certified cables. We test them and make sure we go through. It's the littlest things that can cause the issues that last and linger for a while. JD, next one.
Yeah, and just to chime in too, gang, what I like, Gabe is very technical, and you guys know I'm lightweight technical. I wanted Gabe to leave you with items that you could talk to about a customer. So if you don't remember anything that Gabe just told you, remember that you have behind you an active geo-redundant network across all regions, right? And your regions now are set up strategically so that it's not just the servers, but it's the carriers. Everything is regionally and geographically done. That's why you choose those service regions with RingLogix. So if you can't remember any of the really cool detailed stuff Gabe told you, remember that. Okay. And I gave you some resources here, but you'll get this in your leave behind slide. And then next, Gabe, you're going to talk about fraud mitigation and real-time defense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Do you want me to get you into the next slide?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, let's do it.
We take a multi-level approach at fraud mitigation. We have our own internal systems that are built on profiles to alert us on patterns that we've seen that set off alarms, or patterns in the past where we've seen bad actors go through. Particular destinations or spoofed IPs. These are all put into a custom system we have outside of any other organization that are monitored internally. We sending out these kind of calls or receiving these kind of calls. That limits our impact separate from, did it make it to a do not originate list or anything else? Was this call called this many times? Did they call a high fraud destination more than twice? And even in the event of false positives with these, what sets off a false positive is normally incorrect routing causes a loop or a pattern, which isn't efficient. And normally when we address these, it also helps save money and resources with the customer because they may not realize that they're going through here. This is causing additional minute village. Real-time billing verification. I got a lot of that on the next slide, but that's really what sets us apart. We'll go into that. Stir shaking. We run with TransNexus. Any of you that have been in the industry and have seen anything about this, they're probably the #1 player. Jim Dalton is probably one of the most famous faces in telecom because he is the face of TransNexus going to all the webinars of this. They offer various products that are beyond the stir shaking, which is great because once you're in their ecosystem, they directly integrate with our SBC Portal 1. And their product service allows us to not only do the stir shake and be in compliance, but anything that the industry comes up with, they share products for that we're able to instantly activate because we're already integrated with them. This means while other companies are sitting there trying to figure out how to meet FCC deadlines or how are we going to implement a custom solution, we're already partnered with someone that's way, way ahead of the game and been doing this for a lot longer. That goes with the early adoption and mitigation, robocall mitigation database. We've been in there since like 2020. I mean, we were one of the first adopters. Nobody was in there. We went looking for a list of all our competitors and people we even do business with, and none of them were in there yet. It was so small. And you didn't even have to be compliant in those days. You just, it shows, hey, we're reading what you're doing. We're following it. This is what we're doing right now to do to in our plan to get there. And they have been dropping people left and right out of the robocall mitigation database right now. And it says a lot to say we were one of the first in there and we'll be the last in there until they get rid of it. Cloudflare, AWS, Azure, we're using the industry standards, the big names for this. We use AWS for multiple things, probably most with helping us is DNS, automatic DNS failovers. We're using Route 53. We also use the virtual infrastructure. As I was saying, we have in-house tools that we use, but we also use third-party tools, multiple monitoring systems to sit there and see what's going on in the industry. How can we better protect ourselves from fraud? What's the new type of fraud? Everybody consists of fraud was, oh, my account got hacked. They put some minutes on there, or they hit a toll number. Now it's spoofing. Now it's impersonating. That's where this is really coming in and where the FCC is cracking down on. To go along with what Jamie was saying with the call, inbound call process, we do call authentication. Not only at the SBC level where it challenges any system that comes through, but that we're also authenticating against TransNexus for any issues that may be found in any one of their databases or honeypots that we go. Shared references, I put this in there. We love to share what we do, but we can't always share the details of how we do it or how we use the mixture in depth. We've been asked in great detail sometimes, and it's really the secret sauce that keeps us protected from having those multiple day outages or the kind of issues you see our competitors have. So we're more than willing to share who we use this. We're not doing anything Mickey Mouse, but at the same time, we can't give out exactly how we've implemented it. And sometimes it's just leveraging the right tools that are on the market, put in the right way to create that combination.
So when I jokingly tell you guys that we have like 27 monitoring systems for fraud, I'm not actually like joking all that much. It's kind of real. It's kind of real deal. Cool. Thanks. You want to move on to real-time billing?
Yeah. So this is Portal 1, which is our SBC, does real-time billing. This is huge. I don't think how many people truly understand what a beneficial add this is. I've worked at many places where we reconcile our CDRs every 4 hours, every 8 hours, or most of the time at the end of the day. That allowed a massive amount of fraud to happen before it was caught and to actually find out what's going on. Portal 1 checks your account balances, make sure, hey, you're making a call to this destination. How many minutes realistically can you make on this call? This is what's going to cut you off. It's allows us to quickly go through there. It has its own fraud protections in there as well as a custom fraud list that we run. Out of the box, we have specific profiles for even not international, not weird destinations, but specific US high fraud destinations. And we enable most of these by default to protect people. And that automatically stops so much fraud that comes out. And the reality is just being on this system means that your customers are safer out of the box. Like just on a rip with the billing and the authorization of the calls. And this is before we get into the custom fun stuff.
Cool. All right. So now you're on to monitoring, logging, and continuous protection. Here you go.
We watch everything. I cannot tell you how much we watch it, how many different systems we have do this. I've got system 1 monitoring system 2, monitoring system 3, monitoring system 4. They're monitoring each other. Some are internal, some are on the private networks, some are external. The ones that are external in multiple places, we have multiple companies doing it beyond what's on our status page. And our monitors go in depth. We're looking not just, hey, is it pinging SIP health? Is the SSL working? Is there actual web traffic? You're not getting just a generic Apache web page. We're looking at everything. We have deep insights monitors looking for hardware anomalies, any kind of load. Sometimes, a lot of the times when we start to see a fraud and there's not a packet that's being, a situation that's being caught proactively. Well, proactively by one of the tools is it's a new method coming in. We'll notice spikes that are unusual in the CPU load that allow us to go back and say, hey, we're seeing an anomaly in this. Let's go back and investigate. Is this an attack? Is something wrong? Is something going there? This also helps us quickly identify issues, and if something is to happen, how we get to it fast. Every single call in the system at every data center is logged, PCAP'd, jitter scores, registration. I mean, a complete detail of everything that goes in there, and done at the PCAP level, outside of what you guys see at the SIP log levels that you see through the either Portal 1 or through NetSapiens on the call traces. So this allows us to really get in there and we can see what the jitter rates were, if packets were in and out of place, were there registration issues. We can go back and look at registration issues. But this is all centralized and brought into one place where our technicians are easily able to look at it, identify it, and either fix it or escalate it. Hey, we're seeing a problem, we're seeing cost, trend management. It allows this to handle very well. Jim, you have anything on this? You want the next one?
Yeah, you want to go on to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So with all that automation all that monitoring, we started going, how do we automate stuff? How do we best use this? We have all this data and start pulling it back. Originally, we started coming up with incident response plans, how we do things and go through. The reality is to keep a 5.9 number for a year. That means 5 minutes of downtime for an entire year. That's not a lot. And when you put human involvement into that, just the waking somebody up in the middle of the night or having somebody check that email that's in the knock, go through it, look at it, we've lost those 5 minutes. The idea was automated. This is what we do. How do we get this in place, which resolves our issues and allows our team to sit there and then research and look into what the issue was without having to address it because it's automatically been addressed. We do this through automatic failovers, AWS Route 53 DNS, which has been a big one, which also brings us back. After it's noticed that we're there, it does bring us back to the original site. So everybody goes back to where they were. They don't go, well, my phones weren't registered here or I had a customer there. It normalizes the system after the incident's passed, which had been a huge issue in the past where it responded too quickly to the outages. Also with this, the multiple monitoring systems allow us to quickly identify false positives. An internal system gives me 3 on a private network and nothing else catches it. We know that's having an issue. Or we'll have a off-network third-party monitoring service blow up, but the other one does, and turn another check go through, or seeing it off there. That allows us to help identify the harder part, which is we're not having any issues, but somewhere on the general internet there is. How do we change routes? What do we advise customers and go through their app, go through different locations? But this allows us to quickly, within seconds, react to a scenario, make sure it's not a false positive, be live again. And then the reality is this has happened. No one's noticed it before in the middle of the day. We've had to move something and move a record and it goes through. And the reason we went even as far as the DNS updates is because while we use SRV and all the industry standards, not everybody's equipment's going to support an SRV. Not everybody's equipment's going to use the more advanced features, and you get stuck with, well, I can only register to an FQDN. Okay, cool. This is going to bring you over. You may have to restart or flush the DNS, but for the most part, they'll move over and then come back, which is our way to try to make sure we leave nobody behind with whatever equipment they're running, from the most advanced to the least advanced. That failover is built in there. Stir shaking does play a big part of this now, because it's going to be more than just the certification of the calls. It's looking for stuff. They're actually looking now. There'll be a new FCC release coming up about being able to determine AI robocalls. Is the person on that call actually a person pretending to be a person? And that is something that they're putting into controls and looking into doing. That's how far they've evolved on this. So the stir shake started off just being recognizing bad actors, but it's moving into a much further protection for us. It's also kind of a pain in the ass with the regulatory on it, but this is where the regulatory and the security, I find, match for a common cause. And it'll take a little bit of time, but they'll get it sorted where it's smooth. We also do monitor, again, everything actively, even down to jitter statistics between sites, between servers in the same location. We're looking at everything. Is there an indication of cables going bad? This automatically switches it to another NIC on the standby system where we're notified. Really taking the human interaction out of it and letting the first parts be automated. And that really, I mean, numbers speak for themselves. We've been up. No one's noticed any real issues going on, and that's because there haven't been. And everybody goes back. This lets us sleep at night. I mean, there's no more powerful phrase I think you could say than that.
Right.
DDoS, we have it adaptive. We run Cloudflare. The reason we keep it adaptive is anytime any of these DDoS attacks come in and you have to switch over behind any the providers that do this service, sometimes there can be some small inner issues with VoIP or everything else. It just makes it more complicated to go through. And especially if they're getting attacked at the same time, we're running them active, they can draw from there. So we found in our experience, it was best to run this as needed with custom controls over it, so that we're in control of all scenarios at all times, automated or not. We've also automated some cool things where we were looking at anything that scans our network is getting blocked automatically. We have multiple routers at each data center because we run multiple circuits, failovers on each one, redundant power. This has been great. It's a custom code that we wrote, and basically it sits there and goes, okay, you've scanned our server, you tried probing it for so long, you're automatically added to a blacklist on every router in the network. And that has been huge because we've seen some large attacks coming in there. What we're fending off has become more and more often, and we're doing a great job doing this. And this is great. We get notified from it, but it's wonderful to sit there on a Saturday and go, it's not a high load on a server. Oh, this is happening. Just got blocked, all within minutes of each other. Alert comes in, notice it's been blocked in all the firewalls, monitoring, and then we investigate. But it really protects us first in going through. And the fact that we've done so much of this in-house based upon our needs and our watching the logs, which is absolutely terrifying if you've never watched active network traffic of a server on the public internet. So many scans, so many port watches. If you're not used to it, you think the world's coming to an end, but it's normal. But it's also not overreacting to these and blocking everything. You don't want to sit there. Somebody makes a mistake configuring their phone and it starts going off. Okay, that's one device coming from here versus 500 devices coming from here. And it also gives us the insight with our tools to automatically trace where stuff's coming from. Ironically, this weekend we had one phone setting off an alarm every 5 minutes, and it was coming from South Wales, Australia. It's Starlink. Somebody had this thing hooked up on a Starlink device, and every time it would pass, it would try to go through, and that's why the IP was coming up Wales, Australia. It wasn't. It's just the way Starlink sometimes routes their IPs and going through. But it was neat to watch over the weekend. We kind of geeked out on Sit and looked at it and was like, I'm like, why is one phone in South Wales, Australia is doing this? And one of the other engineers and I got on a call. We're like looking at this. We determined it's Starlink. It's Starlink satellites going over. We did the whole track call to find out. I think that's a weird attack, you know, and it wasn't. It was just that. But we also find this kind of stuff a lot of fun, like finding out that kind of information on where the IPs come from the block, which is where a lot of people block by anything foreign or anything in these areas. Now with VPNs, services like Starlink, you can get a lot of false positives on there. It's not really somebody moving around. With this, I mean, this is what keeps us up all the time. I mean, there's some more to it that we can't really share necessarily in public, but this is the core fundamentals of our philosophy of how we get there and what we do, and constantly improving it. Okay, this is working. We've improved this. How do we get this better? How do we get this better? You know, the strategies, the 5 nines for the industry standard, but the reality is 100% is what we're going for. There's no reason you shouldn't if everything's done properly. To core services and even then to auxiliary services.
Yeah, and Gabe, you mentioned to me, which I don't know if you said in this presentation, you know, besides Gabe and Vadim, we have a whole engineering team. And Gabe had mentioned to me recently that, you know, there are, you know, we do use some third-party vendors, but there are things that are strictly managed by our in-house team and built custom for RingLogix by our in-house team that we choose to do that and manage it so that we're not utilizing third parties so that reactions can be quicker, right, Gabe? I mean, you mentioned that to me the other day, but
that's the endpoint server I was talking about with the automated blocking of the IPs in the firewall. That's where it's automatically looking and going for. And the other cool thing is it blocks it at the firewall level once we're done, which means it's not even getting into the network. The servers have firewalls, there's another firewalls on the virtual level and the load balancers. The reality is to stop it before it even becomes a load issue or anything else in the system once we know it is.
Yeah, but your team built that and managed it. It's not us going out and getting through.
Yeah, this is all in-house. These are all things that we built. And that's why we review every time something gets blocked, because like the Starlink, that was valid. We had to adjust our scripts to sit there, go, okay. Because we're constantly looking, what's the new attack? What's the new plan? What's this? And then we audit the code that we wrote accordingly to go through.
Cool, cool. All right, we can open it up for some Q&A. We have some time. Anybody have any questions? Don't be shy. You can put them in the chat. We could probably let the mics
so
loose.
Here's a question from Mike. He's asking about robocall mitigation and stir shaken. Are they the same thing? Gabe,
they are interconnected.
Different, but connected at a point.
Yeah, so you have the robocall mitigation database, but the name is a bit deceiving because in that database you have to be in is the stir shaken database where they verify you have stir shaken. So they intertwine the two. The idea of stir shaken was to cut down on robocall mitigation by verifying inbound calls and by honoring do not originate lists. So one is a byproduct of the other, but they're intertwined. Stir shaken is the technology, the main one that the FCC is using to integrate to stop robocall.
Cool. All right. Seems like that answered Mike's question. So Sam has a question here, Gabe, regarding what steps can I take in terms of security? You know, I will interpret this message as they have some responsibility for their customers' network.
Assuming you would have access to your customer's network, for security, I always try to split things up. This again really depends on your experience in networking and where you feel comfortable, and also with what the businesses will allow. I've worked with customers where this was the proper solution to install, and they're like, we can't do that, or for whatever reason, and had to work around those type of scenarios. For sure, locking IPs, firmware updates, making sure everything's there. I would separate the networks if you can, VLAN them out. Sometimes it's difficult when you have a PC hooked up to a phone and you still got to run a separate VLAN port through there. Get a little complicated because the traffic's still going through the phone. And it also depends, I think, a lot on the business. If you have publicly available phones, locking down where they can go. There's a lot of businesses that they have a kitchen phone for when people are on lunch breaks, or, you know, if it's a gym, there's a public use phone. Restricting those and making sure those very locked down where they could dial local calls. A lot of the attacks we see are people, when they hack or fraud calls, will come to find out that was a shared use phone, or that phone was placed on the public internet. Somebody took a Wi-Fi phone and didn't properly secure it, and it decided to join the public Wi-Fi next door and get compromised, you know. So it's really just checking, I would say, doing the site surveys, making everything's up to date, and then looking at the customer's business and how to best adjust for that. But a lot of it is, it's social engineering. Yeah, you can brute force attack something, somebody's going to see it. But I go to a hotel, I want to plug in a computer, see what I can scan. Why not? Curious. Are these guys secure? Am I plugging my USB in here? No, you know, I don't know adjust them. So there's always somebody looking at. So I find those kind of scenarios are the ones where there's more due diligence needed than an area where you can control more of what's locked down. Also, depending on the brand that your phone you're using, I would always recommend get sign up for their management software. Yealink is the main player out there, I would say, as far as just the sheer numbers. And they Grandstream does as well have these sites that allow you to monitor their devices. You can check for registrations, odd patterns, and registration I find would be key in this, because a lot of times somebody gets the credentials, they'll re-register, and you'll see it change the registrar agent and IP address, and then go back, and they'll fight back and forth, and you'll see those calls. So anytime you see anomalies or anything like that, monitoring the network, I would say, are good points. Keep an eye on everything that you have.
Very nice. Carl brings up an incident. I'm going to say this is about 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Bandwidth. Bandwidth was under DDoS attacks, and that clearly had impacts on some customers at that time. So the question is, does RL have more options today to better adjust to major carrier issues?
In that aspect, that incident was part of a chain of incidents that happened. It wasn't just bandwidth that had the issue at that time. It was most DID providers. This was a targeted attack across the industry for pen testing, and they pulled out some heavy guns for doing this. It changed the industry as a whole with security, and I'll say that from the carriers on down. They've implemented now having, you know, either Cloudflare or
I think
Anaconda, or,
bandwidth
you know,
uses Cloudflare, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Couple, but a lot of the carriers did not have this, and this triggered an industry wide of getting DDoS providers out there, and that really put a big end to the attack on there on the industry. I think they were probing and found after that the response was pretty quick, where everybody leveled up to make it not easy targets. As far as being able to avoid that, there are different options we're working on still trying to find ways with being able to go in through tunnels. Us being behind Cloudflare as well as our carriers allows us to pass traffic behind the attack, so to speak, so that we can route out from there in the protection. Ideally down the road, the idea would be to have cross connects into certain carriers to be able to directly connect to those networks. However, that's it's not an easy solution, and it doesn't necessarily fix. It would mitigate the downtime in like a bandwidth issue where they were down for days, but in something that would be, you know, with turning on Cloudflare and mitigating for us in a few minutes versus rerouting the IPs through the DIDs to direct connections and going through that would take much longer on the provisioning side. But with the shield that we're under, and the fact that as an industry everybody went under the shield, it allows us to interconnect with each other without having to hit the public internet. In that case, we're all in that private network.
Yeah, and Carl, I obviously remember that too. You know, we had several internal conversations, multiple days, sometimes multiple times a day, where, that was very specific because it was like, do we wait it out with bandwidth, or do we make the decision to move the numbers all over to IntelliQuint and then put our partners in another position where if we move them, IntelliQuint's next, right? Because behind the scenes, like VoIP MS had just gotten attacked prior to that, but they weren't super public about it. And then bandwidth. And so, it tugged on everybody because it was like, if we made the mistake and moved it to IntelliQuint and then they got compromised, you were in this, but in it for even longer, or to like sit on, like, I know that was such an unusual circumstance when that all happened because, bandwidth was a major carrier for not just, we had multiple carriers, but like, Microsoft was hard down, Zoom was hard down, because they were full bandwidth. They were all in with it. So, I don't want to call that an anomaly, but I feel like it kind of could be. But I will tell you, when that was going on, we were having multiple calls, sometimes even multiple times a day, where, so finally at the end of the day, the decision was kind of just made to wait that one out because we didn't want to make you and your customers suffer longer if it went on to IntelliQuint at the time.
Just
I
about
think
everybody got hit.
probably the short answer here is well, actually it's maybe a slightly longer answer than a completely short one. So bandwidth is far more protected today against that type of thing than they were back then. We are far more protected against that sort of thing should it happen to us directly. The industry as a whole have adopted a framework to deal with that, and risk is essentially distributed a little bit more broadly across carriers. So I won't say things can't happen again because that I'm not a fortune teller, but the probability of that happening again is extremely low. And the methods to deal with it, should it occur again, we got more tools today. Bandwidth has more tools today.
It always sucks, but I feel like sometimes you need stuff like that to happen to like find out where you might have a weakness, or organizations in general. Like, it's always a really yucky experience, like, even when our competitors have something that happens and you hear about it, like, part of you is like, yeah, but then the other party is like, oh man, that sucks for them, you know what I mean? So, but I feel like that's where you learn the most and grow the most, is when you do have something weird that pops up and happens. Cool.
All right, that looks like that's all our questions. Thank you, everybody. And Jamie, I believe that there's another call happening tomorrow on an unrelated topic. You want to mention that?
Yeah, yes, for sure. Thanks for the plug. Yeah, so we're gonna do, and this is going to be a monthly reoccurring session. But we've identified that, partners have new employees that join all the time, and we have a pretty structured onboarding process at RingLogix. However, for continuing growth, especially in the technical arena, there was nothing super standardized besides RingLogix University. So we will be holding a monthly tech session. I'm going to be on the first couple ones with Alejandro, our tech support manager, but it's a tech 101. So if you're a new partner and you want to join us, please do. If you are an existing partner that just wants to shine up and see what's going on that's new, join us. If you have new employees that you need some assistance with training, it's a higher level, it's a 101, so don't get me wrong, we're not going to get dirty in this call, but please join us. And if you can't join this month, we're going to have one every single month. So maybe you don't have any new people starting now, but you will in the future. Don't worry, we've got you. It's going to be happening every single month, most likely a Wednesday-ish is when we're going to do it, but we're going to do it once a month for you. Cool.
Excellent.
All right. Thanks
Thanks
everyone
again,
for
everybody.
joining.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Here, everyone. Bye.